Kelly Steelman is the chair of our Department of Cognitive and Learning Sciences and an associate professor of human factors and psychology at Tech. She also holds an affiliated appointment in computer science as well. Now, Kelly has a really cool background. She received her bachelor's in aerospace engineering and master's in mechanical and aerospace engineering at IIT, Illinois Institute of Technology, as well as her master's in aviation and human factors. Kelly did do her PhD in psychology at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and she started and joined the Tech faculty in 2013. Now, Kelly's research broadly concerns different issues of attentional control and information-rich displays, ranging from airplane cockpits to semi-autonomous vehicles to websites. In addition to studying the human performance in safety-critical domains, her most recent work supports the development and maintenance in everyday technology skills. So Kelly, did I miss anything out there? I know that's just a short bio of your amazing background.
No, I think that about covers it.
All right. Thanks. Well, without further ado, Kelly, I'd like to turn the floor over to you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, it's wonderful to be here in Seattle, and what an amazing venue for this talk today. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. So to begin, can you each introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your connection to Michigan Tech? We'll start at the end with Margo.
Hi, so right now I work as a senior human factors engineering manager at Siemens Healthineers. And I have quite a few degrees from Tech. So I have an associate's in electrical engineering technology, a bachelor's in psychology, and a PhD in applied cognitive science and human factors. So hung out at Tech for quite a while. Have the fun fact that I was in the first class of the bachelor's program in psychology at Tech, as well as the first incoming class of graduate students to the program as well. So.
Hi everyone, I'm Leanne Jensen. I am a associate technical fellow at Boeing, and I work in their human engineering department. My connection with Tech, I mean, we all graduated from Tech, that's why we're up here, but I have a degree in mechanical engineering technology, and from there I kind of progressed and I got a master's in instructional design, and then my PhD is in human performance technology. So yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Thanks.
Tough group to follow, but my name is Kristy Sharkey. I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering in '98 from Michigan Tech, and spent the first 10 years in earnest doing engineering. And then in 2009, made a switch to user experience design, kind of slowly a little bit and accidentally, and have been doing that ever since. For the past, I would say a good portion of the past 8 years, I've been an independent consultant doing user experience research, design, and strategy for just a variety of different clients. So I've been kind of on the independent side for a while.
All right, thank you. So one of the things that's been so nice about even preparing for these traveling tech talks is just the opportunity for me to connect with our alums and hear more about their times at Michigan Tech and the things that influenced them. So can you tell us a little bit about a professor or a class that was most influential for you during your time at Michigan Tech? Go ahead, Kristy, you want to start on this one?
Sure, yeah.
Right.
I just went, though. Are you sure?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. So I'll start off with one of my biggest experiences was honestly one of failure. There's a lot of different engineering types, and I struggled with a couple of different classes at Tech. I had many influential experiences, but one in particular was I was on my third time taking thermodynamics, and I'm no longer ashamed to say that, and because I've been out for a while. And the only professor there was Dr. Peck Cho, and anyone who graduated or had him probably remembers him. He was one of those professors that was notorious for being really hard, really tough, really fair, and an excellent professor. So I kind of went to him and was like, hey, this is try number 3 for me. If I don't make it, I don't know what happens. And he just was one of those professors that met you where you were at, and he just kind of showed up and, kind of helped me through that experience. And I'm happy to report at the end of 10 weeks, I had an A, and I started tutoring thermodynamics. And Dr. Cho thankfully changed my relationship with thermo, but also just in general, I think just taught me, like, you know, perseverance and grit will get you everywhere. And I think that's something that all of us have just going through tech and getting through tech, or any engineering degree, really. And so that was a good experience for me, even though maybe it didn't start off that way.
Yes, I think one of the most influential instructors and professors that I had, let me ask you guys a question. How many of you guys took skating at Tech? How many of you guys had Cheryl as your instructor?
Oh my gosh, all right.
Cheryl DePoy. So she's actually one of the most influential instructors and professors that I had at Tech. And it's not from the technological aspect, but it's really kind of the human side. And if you had her for skating, she really took pride and joy in each and every one of her students. And if you started her class and you couldn't skate, you know, she would work with you, and she was very kind and patient. But then at the end of the 10 weeks, because we were on quarters back then, at the end of the 10 weeks, you know, you might be skating without holding onto the board. And you might be able to get the whole way around the rink without skating, but she would just beam, and she was so proud of those students and the progress that they made. And that has really helped me throughout my career to focus on the people. And it's, you know, not always about, hey, you know, can you solve the equation, or what's the current problem? It's considering the entire person, and it's also celebrating and sincerely celebrating their accomplishments as they start learning and progressing throughout their career.
So I had a little bit different experience. So I was finishing up my associate's degree, and I was deciding to leave engineering because I thought it was too easy. And at the commencement kind of ceremony that they had in the college, Ted Anderson, one of the faculty member, came up to me and said, "You're too smart to leave tech. What's your backup plan?" And I said, "Well, I was going to get a minor in psychology." And he's like, "Well, you're in luck. They just started a program. Why don't you go talk to them and see if you could move into that program and see what that would be like?" And so I went and talked to Susan Amato, who at that time was one of 2 faculty members in the psychology department, or psychology program that was there, and decided to take a leap and go into the psychology program. And a few degrees later, here I am. So.
Excellent. So you all are on this panel because you have either human factors or user experience in your title. And some of you in the room tonight might know what human factors is, and others might have come because this is a Michigan Tech event, and maybe you're hoping to learn a little bit about this. So can you each share for us a soundbite or definition for human factors or user experience for everyone in the room? We'll go ahead and throw it back down to the end.
Okay, so my normal elevator pitch is that human factors is designing products for the way people think instead of forcing people to think the way we design products. So that's kind of like my quick soundbite of what I normally tell people I do. So
I'll say it's similar to that. It's about how people think, act, and behave with the environment around them, whether it's designing a product or how they're utilizing the product.
And my title is, I'm more on the user experience side, which is a ton of overlap, but I will say on the user experience side that the sound bites try and change every year, but there's one in particular, Don Norman, who's considered the father of user experience. He worked at Apple. He kind of developed this career basically for all of us to fall into. His sound bite is user experience encompasses all aspects of an end user's interaction with a company, its services, and its products. And I think a lot of UX people, the thought is it's digital, so you're working with digital products, but on the UX side, it really does encompass, it could be how a user perceives a brand or a company when you walk into a store, when you engage with a salesperson, when you call customer service, when you get a delivered package, what's the unboxing experience. So we're trained to kind of look at everything, a little bit more on the emotional side, but there's still a ton of overlap in just making sure that you're designing really good digital or physical products that work for people.
Oh, those were excellent definitions. Thanks. So a lot of people who work in the field of human factors or user experience come to their careers from a wide variety of educational backgrounds. Human factors focused degrees tend to be fairly rare. And so can you each take a moment to talk about the journey that brought you to your current position? Start with you again, Kristy.
Yeah, mine was definitely a meandering and accidental path. I did actually do engineering for the first 10 years. I worked in stamping press automation as a simulations engineer, and then I worked in flight controls in the aerospace industry. Then I ended up at Boeing, moving to Seattle for Boeing, and I thought I was going to be a manufacturing engineer, which I was, but I was actually designing software. And it was the first time I'd worked at a company and on a product that a human interacted with. And for me as an engineering student, I always sort of envisioned that I was going to design things for people. And when I finally did and then got into the software industry, like there's just a lot of doors that opened up for me. So eventually I accepted a position at AT&T on the consumer side, designing products for people to interact with, and was a business analyst. And there was this whole group of people that were called information architects, which is what the old term is. And just sort of was like, I think I have to do this for a living because it's cool that these people get paid to do stuff like that. And so I took a leap. At the time, there really were no formal programs. I mean, tech didn't have anything like they have now, and there really wasn't a formal program. So I just pieced together, I took some grad level classes in information science. I took, I started exploring design from a color, typography, design principles, took a lot of research classes, and just sort of pieced together school and then experience working for some great Seattle-based companies that are really good at user-centered design. And then just kind of got hooked. And I think for me, I was always really invigorated by working with clients and doing like direct client work. So I have focused my career in that area. That's what I'm doing now. And it's really great to be able to work with a variety of clients and sort of step in and help them. They often don't have a design department. They don't know what research is. So, I'm kind of just there to help them not only do the work, but also train them how to do it after. So it's been a good path for me.
Yeah, so my journey started with performance or process improvement. So I kind of started my career off with Lean and Six Sigma and working with the shop floor and factories. And, hey, we've got issues, we can't build the product, or, our people aren't building it right. Those were the things that I'd commonly hear, and then I'd go out there and, work with the processes to improve them. But quickly, I realized, it's not all about the process. You can design the best process in the world, but if you haven't considered the human component of it, it's not going to work well. So over the time, I kind of started adding more and more about the human into our processes and thinking about, how are they going to react to this and how can they potentially make errors? And then how can we design those errors out of the system, or at least make that system robust to accommodate human error? So over time, I had a manager who was encouraging me to go back to school, and I thought that, geez, if I go back for a master's, it means that I absolutely have to specialize in engineering. And to me, it was like, oh, a master's means that you're going to be like a stress engineer for the rest of your life. And I didn't want to do that. And that was like my whole world of education. I didn't know that they had human factors degrees because they were still kind of just being developed and out there. So I did a little bit of research and then found, oh wow, you can go back to school and you can specialize in human performance. And so that's kind of how I got back into school. But then I've continued using, my knowledge throughout my career to work on the human factors problems and the human side of everything.
So I had a little bit more of the kind of traditional, we'll say, journey into human factors. I did start out in engineering thinking I will get a degree in electrical engineering technology and I'll minor in psychology and then I'll go do something cool with that. And that was kind of my idea going in as a undergrad. And then, at some point I said, yeah, engineering isn't really for me. So I found out that they had a whole psych program, so I went and did that. And luckily, at the time I joined the psych program, they also got a faculty member who happened to be a human factors professor. And so that was his research, and he was like, you have an engineering degree. and a psychology degree. Why would you think of doing anything but human factors? So he convinced me to apply to grad programs in human factors, and so actually went off to Kansas State University and got a master's degree in cognitive human factors psychology, and was at a place where I was kind of like, it was good, I enjoyed it, the economy was terrible, and so I was like, okay, I can take a job that's not this, or I can go back and get more school. And so I found out that Michigan Tech had opened up the program that I was looking for, which is the Applied Cognitive Science and Human Factors program. And so I applied and was accepted into the program and was able to finish a PhD there. And something kind of cool where I trained people to make better decisions by not teaching them anything about decision making, but teaching them how to make better graphs and make a graph that helps them make their decision and actually make better decisions. So it was kind of the program actually requires that you have an application and a theory improvement with your PhD. So it was a really cool fit for the way I thought about the world and wanting to do those applied, aspects. But I know since I've left, a lot of things have changed in the program because Kelly's been working hard on some cool stuff. So Kelly, what's new?
Thanks. It was actually the Applied Cognitive Science and Human Factors program that brought me to tech. In fact, it was meeting Margo at a Human Factors conference, and she, along with the faculty who were there, recruited me about 10 years ago. And one of the things that was so exciting to me was that there was this fantastic graduate program that really centered the human at a university with amazing engineering programs. And of course, we have our new College of Computing. And there are so many folks at Michigan Tech who are really engaged in neat work around human-centered design, coming at it from a lot of different areas. And one of the nice things about being a faculty member at Tech is that we actually have the ability to create programs. And so we've seen the growth in new innovative programs all around campus. And it really just seemed like the time was right for an undergraduate human factors program. So we already had a bunch of faculty doing research in that area, had a bunch of graduate level coursework, but so many of our undergraduate students in psychology were kind of hobbling together their own human factors program based on the electives that we were offering in our department. And so we thought, why not actually create a program that is truly Michigan Tech, that will take all of these foundational courses in how people think, feel, and behave, the research methods courses that focus on understanding the relationship between people and technology, and bringing in engineering fundamentals, coding courses. In the kinesiology department, we have classes on physical ergonomics. Our visual and performing arts and humanities have courses on usability and visual design. And so the ability to kind of take all of the best of Michigan Tech and that are really working at the intersection between humans and technology, we were able to create a really innovative, I think, undergraduate human factors program, which we actually just launched this year. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out of that. I think Margo and others who've graduated from our PhD program have gone into industry and done some really interesting things. And I think now more than ever, there's a lot of pathways for undergraduates with that degree, as user experience and user research and human factors is really growing. So, all right.
Makes you want to go back to college.
I know, right? Well, I think the goal is, design the programs that you wish existed when you were a student, All right. So, one of the things that I loved so much about human factors is it allowed me to marry so many of my interests that I developed as an undergraduate student in one place where I could solve problems that were really meaningful to me. So can you talk a little bit about how the field of human factors or user experience has allowed you to bring together your interests, your passions, and leverage your degrees? You've talked about it a little bit, but...
To be honest, when I switched to UX, I thought I would kind of hang up my engineering hat. I thought, well, I don't want to be the only engineer in a group of designers. It's not a good place to be. But I found over time a lot of what really people need is they need systems thinkers that can think about not just the systems you're building and designing and the back-end systems and the databases, but also the systems of the organization. So a lot of the tools I build might be like workflow centric, and it might be one tool that's supposed to bring together, like for USAA, an entire banking organization with insurance people and risk people, and they're all coming together using the same thing. So I just find the ability to be able to tackle complex systems problems is something you do in engineering school all the time. And I've just never not done that since. Like, it's always behooved me to be a good systems thinker and to be able to think practically about problem solving. A design is just problem solving. You can make it pretty and you can make it trendy, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't solve the problem, it doesn't really do the trick. So yeah, it's been a good mix for me.
And speaking of the integration and systems portion of it, part of human engineering and human factors is really being that communicator between the different groups. And that's where the design and the engineering background really comes in, is you can talk to the engineers in their language and you can translate those human needs and the user's needs to them. And it's that integration piece of it and the communication piece. What I love about what we do in human engineering and human factors is that it's so multidisciplined. And, as they've touched on with the degrees, there's so many options that are out there and you're always learning. There's always something new. And especially at the rate things are changing right now, we're learning so much more about the cognitive science side of the house that, you got to keep going back to school to keep up to date with all those, new advancements that they have. But yeah, it's just being able, you're not pigeonholed, or at least I don't feel like I'm pigeonholed, and I feel like there's always an opportunity to grow and develop and learn something new, and it's communicating with everybody and kind of getting the message across in the language that everybody speaks.
Mine is actually, I took my favorite pastime at Tech, which was actually sitting in the MUB and people watching. And I say I've made a career out of people watching, because I was able to take the research skills that I learned through programs and classes and actually turn that fun pastime that I had. My friends and I would sit in the MUB and we're like, wow, look at that one. And you're trying to figure out what they're doing and why they're doing that, right? And so now I do that as a career, and it's one of the most interesting things that I found is that, all the skills that I learned through my coursework really let me use that thing that I just enjoyed to make money. It's crazy to me. So
it's really neat, I think, that all of you are in very different industries. And certainly there are human factors roles across a wide range of industries. So can you each talk a little bit about how you view the role of human factors or user experience in your particular area, and what pressing problems you see that are being solved and the exciting opportunities?
Leanne, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first.
Next up.
So we're getting a lot involved in autonomous systems, and there's a huge human aspect of that. People always think that, autonomous systems, it's not going to create stress or a workload on an individual, and it's actually the opposite that happens. So to me, that's a really interesting development, is how the human is playing in the autonomous systems. Decision aiding is another one, is, how do we get software and artificial intelligence that can help a human, not make the decision for them, but help them as they're getting tired. What are the options that are out there? What is the best option? And letting the human still choose, their own path. But it's really kind of what we call decision aiding rather than decision making. And then the last area that I think is really interesting to me is I work a lot in the factory and the production systems, and we are now getting involved in how do we keep our workers safe and healthy, and how do we tell when they're fatigued, and knowing that information, we can rotate them or give them a different assignment to, if they're getting cognitively fatigued, how do we give them something else to kind of let their brain rest? Or if they're getting physically fatigued, let's give them something maybe a little bit off their feet for a little bit of time, and dynamically changing their work schedule as the day goes on based on fatigue. So to me, those are kind of three of the big areas that are coming up. And my interests specifically are in the production system. So the fatigue monitoring to me is a huge one, because nobody wants to go and work an entire day and come home just completely exhausted. And no one wants to make mistakes either. Nobody wakes up in the morning and is like, how many mistakes can I make today? So when we're getting this new technology and we're knowing more about the people, that we can prevent those mistakes from being made and giving them other tasks and assignments instead. So who wants to go next?
That's interesting. That's really interesting. I would like to work there too, I think. I come from more of a variety perspective, so I've worked across industries because I have worked on the freelance side. And so I do think one of the things that is interesting is just the fact that once you understand how to do user research, how to define the problems of the user, kind of just the whole user-centered design process, and coming up with product requirements and understanding what the tech limitations are and what the business goals are. Once you have that process down, you can apply that to anything. It's no different than learning thermodynamics, right? The thermodynamics of things are the same. So seeing how that can be applied across industries, to me, is what's most fascinating. And I think a lot of good UX in the beginning was reserved for big companies like Microsoft, even Boeing to a certain extent, Facebook, Google. So these people are thought leaders. But what's great now is like the company I'm working for right now is actually originated by a tech alum, and it's an architectural and engineering firm. They're not a software company, but they are developing a software just for the sake of interacting with their clients and improving workflow efficiency. And that's something that 20 years ago, or maybe even 10 years ago, you wouldn't see normal companies that aren't software companies try and figure out how to develop digital products for people. And so I think they're doing it with like one really good developer and like a lot of common sense, and they know that they need someone to come in and help them. And I'm finding that the reach of UX is starting to broaden into areas that aren't gaming and fun things and that sort of thing. And they're just really practical problems. And now that we're able to, it's just more accessible, just in general. And I think accessibility is kind of an exciting avenue, just to see where it's going to be applied in 10 years that it wasn't accessible 10 years ago.
Yeah. So I'm in medical device, and only recently, like since 2016, has the FDA mandated that companies make sure their products are safe and effective for use. And so when I joined the company I'm at now, they're like, your only job is make sure somebody can use this safely and effectively. And I'm like, well, there's a lot more that we could do. Like, we could make this enjoyable to use. And as I've been there longer, we've been able to shape that a little bit and move towards that we can actually do ease of use instead of just making it safe. So, using that as like the marketing tool of, hey, this is the easiest to use system on the market. It's a different tool than what they're used to. So it's been kind of a slow process in the medical device field to really get them moving in that direction of, this is not just something that the FDA mandates, but you can actually make money on it. So it's kind of an interesting shift that we're trying to make right now.
All right, so what skills do you think are the most critical for human factors and UX professionals to be successful, or that need to be developed along the way on their professional journeys? Would you like to go? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go. So I definitely think more and more getting some formal degree is important. So when I started, there really wasn't anything, so you could piece together something, but I'm seeing more and more there's somewhat of a requirement that you either go through a very rigorous certificate program or you have some sort of foundational. So I think it's great that those are becoming available. But within that, I think user research skills, having a foundational understanding of like good research practices that are based on real psychology and that sort of thing is really important. And then listening and empathy, being able to just listen and not have all the answers. And I think we think that we're trained to have the answers, whereas really the whole process is designed to uncover the problems. So you go in really not having answers, and I think being comfortable with that is really important.
And being solution neutral is one of the most important skills, like you're talking about. You need to go into the problem with a really solution neutral mindset and use your communication and skills of observation skills to really deduce what the problem is. Because a lot of times people will come to you And they'll it's not really a problem that they give you. They're like, hey, we need you to go and develop training, or we need you to go do X, Y, Z. And if you just take it at face value and you don't use those listening skills and you don't go to the user and look and observe what's going on, you might miss, the entire reason why they are requesting this training. It's not really a training issue, it's something else. So going, your observation, going down, looking at, people, getting to know them is another big one. The communication isn't just talking to the engineers, but it's also being able to communicate. For me, it's on the shop floor. And, if you're a shop floor mechanic, you don't usually like seeing people walking down the factory and coming to talk to you because you're like, oh, geez, what's going on? So you have to be able to just strike up a conversation and really get that person comfortable enough to really tell you what's going on with that process. And you need them to open up both the good and the bad.
So I'm going to agree with the observation totally. Like I said, people watching is my pastime, but also really one of the most important skills I've found. So when I started work at Siemens Health and Ears, I knew nothing about ultrasound. And now I can tell you the workflows just because I sat and watched people do study after study. I can tell you different things about them just because I was willing to ask questions. And sometimes that being willing to ask questions, and maybe it's a stupid question, but it's the question you need to know why they're doing what they're doing. And so between the observation and the willingness to ask questions, I think those are like the two skills that I've found in combination really have moved me forward where I am today.
So several of us were just at a Human Factors and Ergonomics Society annual meeting where they were talking a lot about the future of human factors and the things coming on and down the pipeline. From your perspectives, how do you see these fields evolving? What do you expect to be the next big things over the coming decade?
So in medical device, we're definitely seeing a lot more AI come into effect. So this is not just the machine doing the work for you, but trying to be smart enough to help you figure out what's your next step. So kind of the decision aids, trying to help you down the path that you're on. And then the other one is really what I've mentioned before, is ease of use of a system rather than just the safety. And so those are the two that we're starting to see them move, but they're definitely the big ones for medical devices.
Yeah, and I'll say, the artificial intelligence is the big one, but alongside with the artificial intelligence is wearable sensors. And, how we're monitoring things. Most people have a Fitbit or a Garmin, so you're getting stats on your sleep, your heart rate, and we're starting to move those types of sensors into different areas. And we're starting to use them, like during work to proactively monitor and make those changes as I talked about earlier. So the sensors, one of the cool things that I think is coming up are textiles that have sensors integrated in them. So you no longer have to be wearing a watch or some big bulky, headset. It's going to be integrated into your fabric, and we'll be able to get that. So you're not going to even know it's there. It's going to be, the shirt you put on for the day. And I think that's going to be kind of groundbreaking once we start, deploying that in different industries. And that's going to open the door for that artificial intelligence and machine learning to take that data and really look for those patterns as we move forward.
Yeah, I think just keying off what you guys said, I think like user experience is always going to follow the technology. So there's technologies that aren't even out yet that we don't know about, that in 10 years, user experience, the whole process will be basically the same, but we'll keep adapting it to fit with new technologies. And then I think the other thing, which is what I mentioned before, a big part of innovation is just having it be more accessible and having it reach areas that it's not accessible to. And you'll start to see user experiences of everyday mundane things just get better because people are actually paying attention and they have the bandwidth. And I think people are, it's more ubiquitous now. I think that people get it. I think people know the term UX more than they ever have. So I just feel like it's just going to keep infiltrating things that are kind of mundane, but sometimes those have a big impact.
Excellent. Well, thank you. At this point in time, let's open it up for questions from all of you. We've got some time for Q&A. You want to run the mic for us?
Burning questions?
I'm always good for a question. Any endeavor, especially one that's leading to innovation, runs into resistance. So what have you found that has been a troublesome resistance to some of the stuff that you're suggesting? I don't know. I guess I'm troubled with resistance in my life, and so I ask about yours. But I mean, is it a factor? And if so, who is it from, and how are you going to be able to overcome it?
I'll start on that one. So, some of the resistance that we see is people just not understanding what human factors are or user experience and what we actually do. And because of that kind of unknown, they have this assumption that, well, you know what? I'm a human. I can design for other humans. There's no special skill for that. And that is the kind of the heart of a lot of the resistance that I've encountered. It's just people not really understanding what we bring to the table. And so the one way that we're overcoming that is really educating people. It's showing what we can do and not necessarily calling it human factors all the time. It's speaking in their language and saying, hey, have you considered an alternative? Or hey, what about, this aspect of it? And asking them questions to get them to start thinking in terms of, oh, maybe my design wasn't good enough. But they'll never admit it. But hey, it would be more along the lines of, oh, maybe my design can be improved. But yeah, that's the resistance that I know I see quite a lot. And it's like I said, it's coming through us marketing ourselves. And I know Kelly and I mentioned that at the conference we were at a couple weeks ago, that being in human factors, we never thought we'd have to market ourselves so much. And yet here we are. But over time, as Kristy was saying, like user experience is becoming pretty common now. Hopefully, fingers crossed, human factors, everyone just thinks about it. Just like you would do a stress analysis on your structure, hey, we need to look at the human for that as well.
Yeah, I think resistance often comes just in, well, at least a lot of the clients that I've had, they are either software engineers or some sort of engineering background, and we are paid to have answers, right? We're paid to problem solve, but I think it's hard to come into a group of people that think they already have the problem defined and say, if we actually spend some time and talk to users methodically and, in quantitative or qualitative methods and do a better job at defining the problem, it's hard to get them to pay for that up front, if that makes sense, because it's like, well, this might be a 4-week effort. And they're like, well, we already know our system, we already know our users, we're fine. And in some cases, that's partially true, right? They're 80% there, but I'm always amazed after a research effort, like how many surprises there are in there, that they're like, we had no idea that this was actually our customer. We didn't know. Like, there's been times where we go in with one hypothesis and come out with, apparently our customer is not a 60-year-old woman, it's a 20-year-old man. I mean, they will flip it on its head. And so, but if people are trained to have the answers to problems, then getting them to say, let's start defining the problem there's resistance there, so.
I mean, the resistance I first faced when I came into as a researcher to the company I'm at now was that they knew they had to do an evaluation and say, okay, we have to show that we're safe. And so at the end, they'd hand something over and say, okay, tell us it's safe. And we're like, but there's a whole process to tell you it's safe, and there's a whole design, and that's how we get something to be safe. And so, we had a lot of resistance there. And so it's over time we've said, okay, here's a problem that we've seen, and it stopped production. And now here's the solution and how long it takes. But had you given us this problem earlier and let us be involved in the full process, we could have saved you this much money. And that's really been, the savings has been the big motivator for them to say, come in early. We want you to look at this before we've got it ready and set for production, because we want to save the money.
Yeah, that money argument is always a critical one to make. And I think one of the challenges is that we don't always have a common language to communicate around human factors and the importance of integrating it from day one, having these conversations from the very beginning of the design process. Some of you might be familiar with technology readiness levels. They're used in DoD, many areas of industry, and it's a scale that basically says how mature a technology is. And for technologies to be acquired, they have to be at certain readiness levels. And this provides a really standard language for talking about technology that many engineers, many managers, they understand that. The problem is that tech readiness levels don't actually talk about humans at all, right? So it doesn't matter if the technology is being designed for humans, need to be used by humans. The tech readiness levels never say, have you actually talked to a human? Have you tested this with people out in the field? And so a very recent development was the creation of human readiness levels that were designed to complement the tech readiness levels. And these were just approved as a new standard in the last year. And I think these are going to serve as a really powerful tool for talking to people in industry, talking to the government, setting policy, kind of requiring human systems integration from day one, and actually having qualified folks engaged in this process from the very beginning who can kind of sign off and make sure from the early research into the standards that need to be incorporated to the low fidelity prototypes to actually rolling things out and testing them in the field, that they have been assessed for humans all the way through.
You've talked about human factors a lot, and I'm wondering if, as you approach each of your issues or problems or products, do you formally describe a spectrum of the humans that you're considering in terms of their skill levels, handicaps they may have, or technological savvy or lack thereof?
Yeah, so the common term for that actually in human factors is personas. And so, for example, I build ultrasound systems, so we have a few different personas that we normally use. So we have a sonographer, and they can range from somebody fresh out of school to 20 years of experience, and those are two very different users. We also have radiologists and cardiologists, so we have to know each one of those users and how they are actually going to interact with our system and understand all of those user profiles as well.
I think you answered it.
Yeah, and just that's usually put together through like a formal research process where you're going out and you're kind of looking at it statistically, like someone in psychology who's saying we need a population of 9 people across this spectrum in order to get good insights. So you're trying to look at a population and then getting quantitative insights into a user population. Just that it's research based.
So my question kind of ties into some of the comments that were made earlier. When somebody mentions human factors to me, the first thing that comes to mind is safety, and how can a human screw up a perfectly good design? And so I guess I was curious, how is the human factors discipline influencing safety analysis for various industries?
You want to take this one?
So I'll start. So at least in aerospace, we have requirements that we have to do human factors analyses. So we've got, human factors are involved on our airplane safety analyses that we do. We also have requirements, and the one that I can talk really specific to, because it's in my background, is the quality management system that we use in aerospace, where our quality management system states, and this is for all manufacturers, that we must include human factors in our root cause and corrective action analysis. We are working to get it more proactively, and we've had a lot of conversations in industry about, how do we incorporate human factors in the design of our processes. We haven't incorporated it yet into the official quality management system, but we are, seeing a lot more trends right now in terms of, if there's an error that was made, we need to go back and look at it from that human perspective. So it's kind of how we're incorporating it. And like I said, my background is really production system and quality, so I can talk to you forever about that one if you were interested. But I don't know if medical industries.
Yeah, medical, it is a mandate from the FDA that, you consider the human. And it's part of a risk analysis process that you're considering all the possible paths that somebody could take with your product that are proper use or improper use. So even if they were to say use it for something you didn't intend it to, you have to include that in your analysis and think about all of those different things. So it's a root cause analysis that really takes the human into account, as well as what is the mechanical problems that could happen and how would that affect the human? Like, say the wheel falls off, what's that going to do to the person who's using the system? So it's an interesting kind of mix of the way we have to do it in medical device, where we're mandated to do some, and then there's stuff that we're trying to do above that. One of the interesting statistics in psychology, of sonography, which is the main people who use our ultrasound systems, is that a sonographer will have a career-ending injury within the first 5 years of their career. So they go through all this school, and in the first 5 years that they're doing their job, they will have a career-ending injury. So as a medical device company, we have some onus to try and reduce that risk, but it's not an easy risk to reduce.
So one of the things that I really loved about your question was that quote of, how can humans screw up a perfectly good design, right? And I mean, I think that this is the problem, right? Is that so many times we create technologies and they're so perfect, right? We really think that they're going to be perfect, and then these darn users, right? Operators come along and do something unexpected. And when we talk about human error, and I think an important thing that human factors brings into the conversation is that we don't just end at saying that's human error, right? That's the starting place in many ways. There's a Reason's Swiss cheese model of human error that kind of talks about the fact that there should be a lot of things that can prevent something bad from happening, right? There should be a lot of fail-safes along the way. And really, you only have these accidents or these incidents that come to fruition when all of the holes in the Swiss cheese align, and all of the various factors, from the organizational factors to the person who commits the error, all happen to align. And so really kind of thinking about how do we actually design the overall system to make it impossible for a person to actually commit that error. And so kind of bringing this lens into the safety world is so critical.
Yeah, my question to the panelists, I'm curious about the impact of technology, more specifically maybe the rate of change of technology today and how it impacts human factors. If you can maybe elaborate more on that, appreciate it.
So I'll take this one if you don't mind. This whole issue of the rate of change of technology is something that I think about all the time. For the last decade at Tech, I've been working with some folks in computer science, running a program through the local libraries to help people keep up with the pace of technology. So I started my human factors work thinking about cockpits and high information, safety critical areas, and I've really spent a lot more time over the last few years thinking about how do we help the average person keep up with the pace of technology, because it's so fast. And originally when we started this program at the library, it was mostly older adults, retired folks who maybe didn't use technology a whole lot in their career coming in, or but it's really changed. It's changed to people who use technology throughout their entire career, right? Were very engaged, may have been early adopters, and then maybe didn't adopt as frequently and retired and went and got a phone 3 updates later and nothing works the way that it used to, or now want to get engaged in, social media for the first time because they have friends and family that want to keep up with them, or a global pandemic happens and all of the ways that we do business have changed and you can't go down to your local bank, you can't file your taxes the way that you used to. And so, this issue of kind of keeping up with technology is so critical. And I mean, it's critical for training our students because we have to train people to be lifetime learners and to be adaptable and flexible. I think all 3 of you have demonstrated the importance of kind of keeping up as the world changes. One of the things that we try to do in our research program at Tech is help people kind of understand more of the gist of how technology works, like how to recover from errors. When you screw something up, how do you get back to the beginning? How to develop more confidence and be less anxious. So, if you watch kids use technology, they play with it, right? They're fearless and they figure it out. And most, especially, consumer-based technologies, it's really hard to screw up if you're confident enough to press that button. And so we try to create training programs to help build that self-efficacy and to help people kind of learn the general rules that hold true even as technology keeps updating.
Nothing to add.
I was going to say, maybe one more. Did you answer?
So I'm hearing a lot of talk about manufacturing improvements and product design. Is there anyone focused on like infrastructure design and management?
Like in terms of civil engineering type of projects?
Yeah, kind of
like,
the user experience of somebody driving down the freeway or something like that.
Yeah, so I can just talk to some of the research I've done recently where there are aspects that they're looking at, how do we improve going across a bridge, for example, or, the vibration that you might feel going across the bridge. I know none of us here have that in our background, so we probably can't give you the details you might be looking for, but I do know that there is like a group of human factors that are dealing with infrastructure. How do we build stuff? The systems, the roads, the buildings as well, architecture and construction. How do we build those for the people that are going to be in them and using them?
There's also like this whole field on just like signage and how do you make signage that people can understand and follow. So like O'Hare, I hate O'Hare because their signage is terrible. And so like I'm walking through it and I'm like, this is a human factors nightmare every time I walk through it. And so like those are the kind of things that I think of when I'm thinking about infrastructure is a lot of signage is the one that always gets me.
I think another place that we're seeing people talk about infrastructure is electric vehicles, right? So what needs to change in order for people to feel confident to adopt electric vehicles, right? There has to be electric vehicle charging stations. There's not very many of them in the UP right now, right? And they're just starting to put these in. In many of the places that there are electric vehicle charging stations, they don't all work, right? Or they're hard to use, or the amount of time that it takes to charge doesn't line up with the kind of commuting that people do. They have to plan differently. And so there are a lot of people in human factors right now doing work thinking about how do we actually update the infrastructure in such a way that we're not creating barriers to adoption, right? Because even if the vehicles work really well, if people can't charge them, they don't trust the systems, if they're not sure how they're gonna get from point A to point B or are afraid of getting stranded, they're not gonna make that investment. All right, well, I think that brings us pretty close to the end. So one last question before we wrap up. it's been really wonderful getting a chance to talk to all of you and hear your Michigan Tech stories. So can you end on a note of what Michigan Tech has meant to you over your career or back when you were on campus? How has your experience at Michigan Tech or as a Michigan Tech alum influenced your life and career?
I think just in general, I think going through tech, there's just a certain rigor to it, and I think it prepares you for a lot of things in life. I know it has me. I think back to my very thermodynamic story, like just getting back on the horse and having grit. I think there is just a certain grit to it, an engineering tech grad in general. And I think what you learn at Tech is how to think objectively and how to methodically solve problems. I think so much of what we do is just problem solving, and the one thing you can never argue, like Tech makes great problem solvers. So I've been really grateful to have come from Tech, and I always, if people aren't sure what they want to do, I'm like, if you're good at math, just go to engineering school. You'll figure it out after. You don't have to be an engineer. There's a lot of pathways. So yeah, it's been a great foundation for me.
Yeah, I know you mentioned grit, so I got to add, it's sisu, right? It's living up there in the winters and persevering and, being able to overcome everything. As you guys are aware, it's not the best environment at all times to be in. We've got a small community, it's cold, it's got snow, we're a little bit isolated. You can really get to build the relationships with your coworkers, your fellow students and classmates, and it's building those relationships that I think really, really have been beneficial and helpful, because you guys can't be out there making enemies, because at the time I went to school there, I think it was just under 5,000 on campus. I know it's grown since then, but you got to reach out to your friends for help if you're having trouble in classes. You learn how to find entertainment in the wintertime, when it's dark for so long. And then, the one thing that being an alum, I love working with other alums, and I would rather have them on my team. I don't care their background, but if you graduated from Tech, I want you on my team, because I know you're going to solve the problems like Kristy was talking about. You're not going to give up, and you're going to, solve whatever gets thrown your way, and you're not going to just be like, oh, you know what, I can't figure it out. You'll just work it and be determined to succeed in it.
So kind of building on the relationship part of that, my current role I only have because Kelly's lab did some research for my past manager. And my manager was looking for somebody to fill a role really quickly. And she's like, well, I know people from Michigan Tech know how to do research. So I'm going to find somebody in the area who's from Michigan Tech and has that degree that Kelly works in, and I'm just going to hire them. And it's been 5 years, and I've moved up from a contractor all the way to a senior manager. So it's one of those, had Kelly not done some random project for a medical device company here in Seattle, I wouldn't be where I am today. So it's really cool, all those different connections that we have.
Of course, if you hadn't tracked me down at that Human Factors conference a decade ago, I would have never ended up at Michigan Tech. So it comes full circle.
Yep.
Can we give a round of applause to our great panel for tonight?